Okay, so what we have here is our standard 9-inch chef's knife. This is what you'll be using predominantly throughout the semester here at La Chanterelle. This knife is comprised of several key components. Obviously you have the blade, the sharp side, the spine along the back end, the handle, the grip, whatever you prefer to call it, and then this area here, which is the tang. Now, most commonly, the biggest mistake people make with this is holding it just like this. When you hold it like this, you don't have much control, you hit your knuckles. So what I always recommend people to do is to kind of choke up a little bit, take your index finger and your thumb, and you hold it, get a good positive grip across the tang. Try not to run your finger down the spine. That makes it very unstable and wobbly as well. Nice, loose grip in the front part of your fingers, the index finger wrapped around and your thumb kind of braced right there. That will make it nice and easy to chop, move your knife, to use it to scrape, whatever you need. With your left hand, whatever product you're holding, you never want to have your fingers out, you never want to have your fingers that way. You always want to have your finger over the product and curled like that so that you can run the knife along your knuckles. Notice I'm not going straight up and down, always slightly angled out. If the product slips, if your hand slips, the knife ultimately will go that way instead of into you. So you always want to maintain positive control with your cuts like that. Typically, you want to keep the point down on the cutting board as much as you can and use this type of motion to go through whatever you're cutting. You see TV shows, you see movies where they do. You'll never be required to do that. You'll never be asked to do that. That's more so for flair. It's not really practical. Point down, gently moving through what you're cutting. So what we're going to be doing today is cutting an onion, summer squash, zucchini, and eggplant. All things that we'll be cutting in Workshop 1 and ultimately sauteing and making a dish with that day. What I'm going to be doing today is cutting them in order that they need to be cooked. Onion typically takes the longest to cook for this particular exercise, whereas the squash, zucchini, and eggplant take a little bit longer. So we'll do the onion first. We'll put it in its own mixing bowl. The other three products, which have relatively similar cooking times, will go in their own bowl. To my right, we have another bowl that's going to be for composting. The skins, the stems, the ends, everything that we're not going to use for the product, we're not just going to throw away, we're going to keep for compost or for making stock in the future. These are all things that we'll touch upon in Workshop 1. Now, what I'm going to show you is one specific method, one particular cut. There are literally thousands of ways to do this. This is what I found to be the easiest and what we'll be doing throughout the semester. Generally, we will be wearing gloves. I did wash my hands, and for the purpose of this video, it's a little bit easier to see, so I will not be wearing gloves for this one. So, first, your onion. You have the stem end and the open end. What we're ultimately going to do is cut the onion right in half. So then we can see what we're dealing with. From there, we'll begin to clean it. So you always want to try to cut lengthwise right through the middle of the stem. One motion downward, let the knife do the work for you. You don't want to really be pushing down. You want to run the blade to let it do its work for you. So now you can see the stem. That's the end that's going to keep the onion together as we begin to cut it. If you were to cut this piece off, all of those layers will begin to fall apart. Now that we have it cut, we want to get the skin off. So if you take just the skin, you'll see that very hard outer layer comes off pretty easily. This outside layer will still be relatively rough. It's almost like a guard petal like roses have on the outside. You want to take that off and use it for your stock. It does look like a little bit of waste, but ultimately it's better in the cooking process. So all of this will go in our compost or stock. Now, keeping the stem intact, you can kind of trim it a little bit just to keep it clean. The top side, the outside end, you want to trim a little bit of that off. Obviously that not usable part, that will go in our stock pot. So this should be what we're working with. Now again, this is just one way to do it. There are quite literally thousands of ways. This is the easiest and most straightforward way. Taking the stem and facing it away from you, what you're going to do is take the tip of your knife, and you're not going to cut all the way through to the stem, but going toward the stem end, You're gonna cut straight through and down. You can kind of see right there. Not all the way down toward the stem, but just through, all the way through to the bottom. You're gonna continue this process about 1/2 inch apart, keeping those slices very uniform. All the way to the end. It's ultimately what your onion should look like. Once that's done, you're going to turn the stem side away from where you're cutting. On the righty, I'm going to turn that to the left. Hold everything nice and tight together. Now, like I said, keeping the tip down and using that reciprocating motion. The same width that you made these cuts, about 1/2 inch, we're going to make perpendicular. Now what this gives you, as you can see, is just a very basic, rough dice. Some of the pieces aren't the same just because of the way the onion is cut, but that will help to ensure the product is all the same. The reason we want the product all the same size is to ensure that it cooks at the same time, and that when it is plated for the guest, it will look the same on the plate. Each bite will be roughly the same size. Now I'm going to take off this product, put it in our bowl, set it aside for later. Okay, now, the next two items we'll be cutting, the squash and the zucchini, relatively similar in size, shape, texture, all of that stuff, and the way that they're made up. Same thing, you have your stem end and your outside end. Now, for the purpose of this workshop and this exercise, the way that we're going to be cutting them is into half moon slices. So the first thing you want to do, cut your stem off. Goes in our composting bowl. Cut your outside end off. Also goes in the composting bowl. Now, as you can see, it's not perfectly straight, so it does kind of roll around a little bit. The first cut we're going to make is straight down the center. Now, if it's on its side and you go straight down the center, the two pieces are going to be almost banana shaped. So you want to try to find either straight up and down like that, or with that wobble kind of toward the bottom of the cutting board. If that's too difficult, what we can do, cut it in half, and you have a better idea of which way it's going. So find that little roll, see it kind of stands up right there. We're then going to go one cut straight down the middle like so. Same basic principle, except we're taking out one step like we did with the onion. All we're going to do is go straight down into our 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, half moon slices. Now, as you can see, these are all relatively the same size. The last piece you cut will always be a little off. You can either reserve that to the side, depending on what you're cooking, you can put it right in, or you can always compost it. As you get more proficient in this throughout the semester, and we'll be doing cuts like this again, another method, you can put your two pieces down, and you see they have kind of a weird shape together. If you turn them so that they fit relatively well together, hold them both together, and you can double your production by cutting two pieces at the same time. We're going to take that, put it off to the side, and do quite literally the same exact thing with our squash. As you can see, this one has a much thinner end compared to the bigger end, so one way that I like to do this is find where it relatively balances out. Cut that piece off. We're not just going to throw it away, we'll come back to it in a little bit. It's a little bit more straight than the zucchini was. Same thing, right down the middle. And you can line them up. purpose, again, two different products, relatively the same size. What we'll learn throughout the semester is how similar produce like this, obviously squash and zucchini are very different. They cook the same, they feel the same, almost taste the same, but relatively we're keeping same produce together. Now, the last item we'll be cutting is our eggplant. Generally, eggplant is one of the more difficult products to cut just because of the size of it. You have your stem and your cap at the end. Biggest mistake a lot of people make is they look at where this is and they just cut right off there. There's a lot of good product in there that they're wasting when they do that. So we want to kind of peel this up a little bit, see what we have, see what we're working with. And then cut the stem off. Same thing, we're not throwing that away. It goes into our composting bucket. All right, so looking at the eggplant, as you can see, it is relatively unique in size and shape. So approaching your cut based upon what you did before is going to be a little difficult. So same thing like the zucchini, find where it naturally sits. We're gonna come straight down the middle. Two pieces. Now obviously if we were to do half moon cuts out of this, they'd be substantially bigger. So what we're going to do is split the difference. We're going to take it as it is here, then we're going to cut it down the middle one more time, like so. And then we're going to make our cuts. Now the shape won't be the same, but the size will be relative, again, to our squash and our zucchini. When making ratatouille like we are for the first workshop, the biggest thing is ensuring that all of your pieces are relatively similar in size. The reason we go for this size is you want to make sure that it can fit on one spoonful for the guest. If the pieces are too big, if we were just to take half of an eggplant like this, obviously that's going to be too big to fit on one fork or spoonful. So watch the video, take what you can from it, and hopefully bring some of this in for workshop 1.